Erace is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in the summer of 1993 in New Orleans, to show through conversation that we treat all people with love and respect, people of all colors with love and respect.
That's good.
Thanks. I first will just have everybody introduce themselves, then I'll do the rules, and then I will talk about why I brought the article, and then I'll open the list. So I'll call out who should introduce themselves. We'll start with Louise.
Hey, I'm Louise, been a member of Erace for a couple of decades. Started in New Orleans, now in Austin due to Katrina.
Marva.
My name is Marva. I've been coming to Erace post Katrina. My brother Glenn introduced me to the organization, and I'm happy about that. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And so after you introduce yourself, if you would mute yourself, that'd be great. Richard. You're still muted. I think you tried. There you go.
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happier New Year, everybody. It's glad to be back. And my middle name is Richard. I've been with Eracism since the beginning. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cut out a little bit early this time around. I've got another Zoom meeting that starts at 10, and I'm going to try to double dip. But it's good to be here.
Wow.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Oh, good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be back with you. I'm from Boston, and I've been coming to the meetings for about 2 years, I think now. And I'm very glad to be here with you discussing this article.
Thank you. Bill.
I'm Bill Ives. I've been coming to Erace for about 4 or 5 years. I love the article, and I learn something every time
Yeah.
I have one of these meetings. So I look forward to it with great anticipation. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Cindy.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cindy Morse. I guess 4 or 5 years, somewhere in there. I'm Bill's partner, other half, wife, etc. I remember way back when Erace first started, I never could find Saturday morning free, and I wish I had back then. But I was teaching full time, and it took too much time. So anyway, I'm glad to finally be here for the last few years. I'm excited about starting the new year with you all.
Thank you. Lynn.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Frank. I live here in New Orleans. I'm retired, and I'm happy to be with you again. As Cindy says, happy to start the new year with you.
Nora.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora. I'm in Austin. I've only come for maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so, and really enjoy the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Pedro.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone. I'm here in Austin too, and have been coming to Erace for over a year now, and yeah, have enjoyed the inputs from everybody. So look forward to today, and a healthy new year to everybody.
Thanks. Glenn.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here this morning. Look forward to the new conversation.
Thank you. Greer.
My name is Greer. I've been coming to Erace, I think, since around 2007, 2008. And I love just hearing everybody's ideas. It gives me something to think about, and articles are interesting.
Thanks, Greer. Michelle.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind
Barely.
of faint.
Kind of weak. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that was
And I
better.
apologize for being late this morning.
Just in time.
Happy New Year, everybody. Been coming to Erace since about August of 2020 and definitely enjoy the company and the conversation. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to it.
Thank you. So as, by the way, I'm Phyllis. You can see that on the screen. And I am facilitator today, much to my surprise on Monday when I thought, oh, I better see who I have to remind to find an article for Saturday. And it was myself. So surprise. So the rules of our, or guidelines of our meeting are to get on the list from which everyone will be called in order. You put up one finger. And if you could move it kind of like this, make sure it's visible on the screen. If you do this, it might become too blurry. So kind of a slow, steady, so that I'll see you and I'll put you on the list. And then if somebody is speaking and you have a legitimate clarifying question, meaning there is something about what they said that you need clarification on, not that you want to argue with by asking a question, then you put up two fingers so I can see them, and you will get to step in when they finish speaking and ask your question. There are two questions, two clarifying questions allowed per speaker, to ask the person who's been speaking. Everyone who raises two fingers gets one question. We ask that people keep themselves muted when they're not speaking. We ask that people maintain civility and keep this an atmosphere of respect. And I think those are the main things. Am I forgetting something important? So close to the end, maybe before 15 minutes, depending on the list and how things look, we'll do the roundup where everybody, I'll go around and call in everybody and they'll get to give their final thoughts on the discussion today. So I see Marion is possibly back in. So when I discovered that I was a facilitator, I did not know what I wanted to bring a topic on. And I started looking, and this article came up when I was just kind of Googling things. I was not Googling Asian names at all. And I found it really kind of beautiful and sad at the same time. I think, we don't know what we don't know. I think I'd always heard this thing that the family name would be the first name when Chinese people traditionally have their names written out or said, but I did not know the other parts of the name and the meaning of how it applies to the family with the generationally and in terms of being connected to your own generation and to your parents' family names as well. So I personally had an experience recently where at work, there was a nurse who was Chinese who I hadn't met before. And I was communicating with her by secure chat, and her name was there, and it started with a Q and had some vowels. And I had no idea how that would be pronounced. So later that day, I went over and I was talking to her in person, and I said, can you tell me how to say your name? And she said, oh, it's really hard. You can just call me Jonah. And I was like, no. I said, I want you to tell me how to say your name. And she said, Chana. And I'm like, okay, I got it, Chana. So the day, I think must have been December 30th, the last day before I was off for the new year. I saw her in the hallway and I turned around and said, oh, Happy New Year, Chana. I mean, it's not Chinese New Year, let's be clear. And she said, oh, Miss Phyllis, you remembered how to say my name. Thank you so much. And I literally went around the corner and I thought I was going to cry because I didn't even sense what that would mean to her. But I just hate when Americans try to give people nicknames that are easier for them. And I'm like, if people here can pronounce Chapatulas, they can pronounce Chana. That is my opinion. So, Marion, can you hear us? Okay, I muted you, but welcome.
Yes, I've been trying to get on the computer since 8:45 this morning.
Till 9. Oh, wow.
Something is wrong.
Okay.
The voice kept saying security breach, security breach.
Oh my
So my
gosh.
granddaughter has been helping me.
Okay, well, you're here. And
All right, I can hear everybody.
Good.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep. Happy New
Okay,
Year.
it was not a good start to the day. It's
Okay.
holiday season has been terrible anyway.
So I'm going to open the list now. So I'll mute you again. And Richard once on the list, and Rebecca. Anybody else? Okay, Richard and then Rebecca.
There we go. Well, I fully support Marion Jira Ming Leo's decision to retain her traditional name. For the reasons that Phyllis kind of outlined at the beginning. I think our identities are largely wrapped up in our names, and for folks to recognize the names that we prefer to be called is significant. And I'd like to just point out that I think many of us know that many Americans had their names changed at Ellis Island, either on their part or on the part of the immigration official who said, I don't like your name, I can't pronounce it, so I'm going to change it. That apparently is what happened to my grandfather, my father's father, who was originally from Lithuania. And it happened to my uncle, who was, that's on my mother's side, who is from Hungary. I'm not sure whether it was the customs official or whether it was my uncle's family that had the name changed, but there's a long history of Americans from many different backgrounds, particularly including those European backgrounds where you had 12-syllable names with lots of consonants strung together that were difficult to pronounce. And I think, like everything else in America, there's lots of folks are happy with folks giving themselves nicknames because they recognize their name is difficult to pronounce. So I think there's no one way to address this. But I am very happy that Maria Gina Ming Leo has decided to do this, and I support it fully.
Thank you, Richard. I got on the list, I've got Rebecca, then Glenn, Louise, and Cindy. Anybody else? Sorry, I was looking down trying to get my timer started. And Lynn and Bill. Okay, next is Rebecca.
Thank you. Good morning. So we have a Chinese mayor of Boston, and she's doing, I think, a really wonderful job. There's a very sensitive issue of moving 300 homeless people off the street, and she's handling that, I think, extremely well. So because I read the article, I thought, well, now she's known as Mayor Wu. So is that her first name or her last name? I really had no idea. So I had to look it up. Her full name, I should have realized because I've heard it, is Michelle Wu. But I didn't really know that Chinese people were changing their names. And I'm sort of embarrassed because I have a very close Chinese friend who lives in Los Angeles, far from me. And her name is Doran Zhang. So I suppose that first name has been changed. And I had no idea. I really had no idea that there was so much prejudice against Chinese people. And really until this last couple of years. And I spoke to her and she said, yes, when she goes out, she has to wear dark glasses and she wears a hood over her face so that people won't know she's Chinese because she's afraid she'll be injured. And that was shocking to me. So that's what I have to say for this period.
Thank you, Rebecca. I have Glenn next.
Well, many of you may not know that I had my name changed. Yeah, in 1976. I did some reversed it with the immigrants are doing. I took on a name that's outside of America. My name, I changed my name from Glenn Washington to Glenn Daoud Abdallah. And so it was a shock to my kinfolks. It was a shock to where I was working at. I had to go in there. They had to change their records of the name, what my check was going to be written on. And my boss asked me, "I'm curious, Glenn, why did you change your name?" I said, "Where did you get your name from?" He said, "He got it from his parents." And I said, and the parents got it from their parents. I said, "But my name came through slavery." And I say, I'm changing that, you know. And so, when all these Black people talk about you got to change the street signs and you got to change the name of this college because it's under a slave master's name, but won't change their own name. So I don't get involved with all that emotional talk about changing the street signs and all that, because I know it's phony. Oh yeah, and I did have problems with people wanting to mispronounce my name, trying to make a joke of it, and so I told him, I said, "Look, you can't say my last name. You can say Glenn." Okay, I'll get back on the list.
Okay. You went on right now at the end?
Sure.
Okay. Louise is next.
Yeah, Glenn, I agree with that. Changing your name because yes, it wasn't your original name. People brought over as enslaved peoples. Yeah, that I agree. Changing your name, that was a good move. As far as in the article that mentions about naming their kids a Western sounding name to stop bullying and just make it easier. My family did that. My father is Egyptian and he gave us all Arabic. Well, let's say he gave the boys Arabic names and the girls European names because he thought the boys, he was a bit sexist. He thought the boys would be able to stand up, against bullies better than the girls would, which, I don't know. Anyway, and he actually changed his name when he came to Europe to Jean-Pierre from Aziz. His name is Aziz Radwan. And he's very light-skinned, so I guess he could pass as white and he just wanted to blend in. But there could have been other reasons as well. Who knows? He had a very odd past. But and when I got married, throughout my life, I was always having to say my name and then spell it. Louise Radwan, Radwan. I'd always have to do it, and it was kind of annoying. So when I got married to my husband, who is Johnson, a good old easy spelling sounding name, I changed it to Johnson just because of that, because I was just sick of spelling it out. I kind of regret it, although, I'm not too bothered by a name. I want to be understood when I'm, so I changed it to Johnson. Anyway, I'm rambling. That's it.
Thanks, Louise. Next is Cindy. You have to unmute.
I know better. Thank you. I was interested in, when I began to read this, thinking about my teaching career. I was very lucky because I consider it lucky, because I was in probably the most mixed school in the city. because Tulane International Student Dorm housing was in our district. So I had lots and lots of regular white kids, regular Black kids, and then kids from, I don't know, 20, 30 different countries because their parents were graduate students at Tulane. And so I went back over my class rolls, and it's really fun to look at. I particularly was looking to see about Asian names. Very few of those were in the Asian format. The only one I have that is distinctive is Liu Fei, Liufei. The rest of them were slightly or more Americanized, but it's fun to look at because it reminds me of all the years with all the different ethnicities and sort of backgrounds. One of the best parts of my class, according to many inputs from parents and other teachers, was the involvement of the parents. And I got each parent, and I taught kindergarten, so we're talking little bitty kids when they were first starting in this brand new school. I always explain to them, I will ask you if there's something special in your culture that you like to cook. Plan to come and cook it with our kids. So we had all kinds of input from all over the world. You know, a rice dish with stuff in it, and the kids got to mix it and taste it, and things from India, things from South America. It was a richness that I think taught valuable lessons to all of us. Plus it was fun. It was a treat at the end of the week. We could have a special lunch. It was great. And I hold that very important. And I think our country does not take advantage of, not in the negative way, but in a positive way, of all the cultures that mix together here. So I thank Lusher. Now, again, Lusher's name is being changed because Robert Mills Lusher was a slaveholder way, way back. Rather than look at dark history a long time ago, they're changing the name. Many of us who worked at Lusher when it was such a megalopolis of the world, I just assume keep the name because that's what it means to me. But I do understand the dark history, so they're changing the name. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Anyway, enough said. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Cindy. Next, I have Lynn, then Bill, Michelle, and Glenn. If anybody else wants to get on the list, raise your finger.
In the interest of full disclosure, I will disclose that my husband's original name was not Frank. It was Fagelman. And one of his prior wives did not want that name. But I will just comment that I know many Jewish people who have changed their name from obviously Jewish names like Rosenstein or something to Ross or Clark or something because of the horrible history of anti-Semitism in the world, and they don't want to confront it constantly or be victimized. I was thinking about our vice president and how several people disrespected and insulted her by refusing to pronounce her name correctly. And I've seen that many, many times when somebody is slightly different. The standard white waspy people who are of different political persuasions criticize them and act like they're not worth anything because they don't have pronounceable names, which the person refuses to pronounce, even though the person could. And my third quick comment was the model minority comment. The woman was trying to fit in. She was trying to be the model minority by having an American name, by assimilating, by making no waves, by not giving people the problem of trying to pronounce something they don't know how to pronounce. But it doesn't do Chinese or other Oriental people any good to be the quote model minority, because people are going to hate you anyway if they're so inclined. And in fact, it hides there's a link in there, you can click on it, and it shows that the model minority has driven a wedge between Oriental people, Asian people, and Black people by saying, they think they're better than Black people. And that probably is not true and should not. Everyone who is a minority is going to have struggles, and better to be in solidarity with each other than to compete with each other. And also it makes non-minority people think, oh, well, Chinese have it made, or Asian people have it made. We don't have to pay any attention to them. And in fact, there's a great deal of glass ceilings. There are a great deal of glass ceilings for Asian people. They can go so high and no higher. Anyway, probably 2 minutes are up.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think you heard the.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's all right. Bill is next.
I've had, as several people have said, I had a Jewish wife whose name was Kerbal. Well, Kerbal was given to her by Ellis Island, a guy at Ellis Island, because they had some impronounceable Russian name. I say impronounceable. It was impronounceable to the Ellis Island guy, who didn't want to take the time to learn it. So he became Kerbal. I also had a Jewish girlfriend who was Howard's. Her name was originally Horowitz, but her father changed his name when he wanted to advance his career in English literature to Howard's, which sounds more English. So it's sad that that happens. I had an ancestor who was given a name. He was a Scot, and the British captured under Oliver Cromwell, they captured a lot of Scottish prisoners. They had like 15,000 Scottish prisoners of war, and they were dying off. And so being English, and I say this because I'm embarrassed, or I have an English background too, for the most part. This is an exception. They decided, we'll sell them to the colonies. So he was put in chains and sold to the colonies as an indentured servant against his will. And they sold, it would cost £5 to ship someone to America, and they would sell 10 years of service of this person's life for 30 or 40 pounds. So they were making a lot of money off these prisoners of war. But unlike the Africans, he was free at the end of his 10 years of service. If he tried to run away, he'd be captured and punished, but he was free. And so his name was Dunbar, and he was called Dunbar because he was captured in the Battle of Dunbar. So the English gave him that name of Dunbar. They probably gave a lot of captives. Well, these are all the Dunbars. We're going to go sell them. So he was lucky, though, because he was sold. His 10 years was being the assistant to a merchant. And after his 10 years up, he had learned the trade, and he went on to be a wealthy merchant too. So it was very fortunate for him. Anyway, I think my 2 minutes are up. My 10 years.
They are
Sorry.
now, yes. Thank you. Michelle, and I see you, Rebecca.
Yeah, I also come from a family. My husband's family is Jewish, and he's British actually, but originally from Poland and Russia area, his family was. And so, yeah, we had the same story in his family. They came over and changed their name when they went to England to anglicize it. So that's why it's Scott and not Silverberg. And funny enough, some of his family did actually change it back and kept it. So there are Silverbergs in his family, and then there's also the Scots. And again, names are just one of those, as we've said many times, identifiers. And it's funny, one of the things I really have never really liked my own name, Michelle, because it is so overused in this culture, all the popular names. I made a point when I named all my children to find names that were a little bit more unique because of my own feelings around my own name. So they are very much, points of contention with each individual based on their own experiences, for sure. And I will say that as far as the Asian names and renaming of Asians is concerned, I've known about that since I was in high school, because I was friends with several Vietnamese girls in high school, and they all, to whatever degree, changed their names for those same reasons. And so I was fully aware of that. Two of my good friends agreed to, they had their own American names, but they also kept their Vietnamese names. And so I knew those names, and those are the names I chose to use for them, because those were their names in my mind. The names that they were supposed to be given by the American culture just didn't sit right with me. And of course, I didn't have the level of understanding of this at that time. But for me, at that time, it just didn't make sense. I'm like, why? And one of the girls' names, funny enough, her American name was Michelle. And I'm like, I was like sitting there going, I don't even like my name, and I don't want to use that name. I know you have another name. And so I called her Liu, because that was her Vietnamese name. And so some people knew her that way, and some people, like I'm sure teachers, always probably reverted to the Michelle name. But again, that's always sat. I've known about that as far as one of the things in American culture that we've done to people of Asian descent, and it just has never sat well with me.
Thanks, Michelle. I don't know if you want us to call you something else now. Pick a new name.
No, my mother, funny enough, she said, when I was born, she's like, I thought we were going to nickname you Mickey. And, I didn't, when I've heard that, I was like, no, that doesn't sound right either. But now I'm like, maybe that would have been better.
Okay, on the list, I have Glenn, Rebecca, and then Bill. So Glenn, go ahead. You're muted. I had to mute you because there was talking in the background.
Oh, thank you for muting me, because I might say something embarrassing one time.
That's right. I see you, Cindy.
America has grown up on having a name issue. Because look who they elected for president: Barack Hussein Obama. So that's one point to bring. And the pressure is there when you have that be surprising. You see the problem that Muhammad Ali had. When you look at the history of Muhammad Ali, he kept telling people to call him by his name, and they kept calling him by his old name. So I had that kind of, I didn't really have it that bad, because I did keep the name Glenn, which everybody knew me by, and I kept that because my parents gave me that name, and then I didn't want to make it, difficult for them, that they didn't, they couldn't call me by Glenn. Now, I had all my children, I gave my children my last name, and I also gave them their first name. One was named Tahir, one was named Kadir, and one is named Jihad. Now, Jihad, when he grew up, the pressure about the name, about his name Jihad and his name Abdullah, made him go back and change his name to Washington, which I was very displeased and dissatisfied with that. But what could I say? Because I went against my parents and changed my name. But I think eventually he'll feel, he'll see that was not, that was not a great idea to do. That's a little bell went off.
That's the bell. I have a clarifying question though.
Yeah.
Did Jihad keep Jihad?
No, he let Jihad go. Oh. He called himself. I don't call him by it, and he accepts that I don't call him by it. I call him by. I still call it Jihad.
Gotcha. I know a woman named Jihad who goes by Gigi.
Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca.
Sorry. Well, I was struck in the article by the beautiful meaning of the names of the author. And I wondered if now that I've learned that Chinese people have changed their names, if there are many names that have such a beautiful translation, kind of our names are sort of, I don't know, they're sort of plain compared to the Chinese name that has kind of a musical meaning. So that was my only thought. If we could possibly let all the Chinese people change their names, would we learn those meanings and learn to pronounce those names? I don't know. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Next is Bill.
Yeah, I read Barack's autobiography, and when he was young, he was called Barry, an anglicized version of that. And then he discovered that Barack was appealing to women. It was a cool name. So he changed his name back to Barack to have more success with women. It's funny. But my daughter has recently written a book about mountains and imaginary mountains, but she takes a very feminist approach to mountain journalism. And also she points out that all these mountains that were given anglicized names like Mount McKinley, she views it as a form of colonialism, of taking over, because the English European descent mountain climbers, they'll climb a mountain and give it an English name like McKinley. And when it's got an indigenous name all along, and many of the mountains that they claim they were the first to climb, they were the first European person to climb, because indigenous people have been climbing up and down the mountains for a long time. Now, not the really high ones like Denali. Denali was the original name for McKinley. And it was one of the few times when that name was reversed, much to the chagrin of a bunch of Ohio Republicans, but it's officially now Denali, which was the indigenous name, rather than Mount McKinley. And as I said, that upset a lot of Republicans. But I see this, the names of people as also treating them with disrespect. It's a form of colonialism to expect people to anglicize their names. And I think it's very sad.
That was your time, Bill.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm glad that the tide seems to be turning a little bit on this issue.
Thank you. I've got Cindy, and then the list is open. So Cindy, you can go and people can put up fingers if they want to. Richard? Glenn? Marion? Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, the question of what we're called when we're young is important to a young child, I think, for a period, sort of the process of identification. Cynthia, and it has now become almost all the time Cindy, but Cynthia seemed very snobbish and sort of too sophisticated for me as a child. I really didn't like it. So my mother shortened it to Cindy, and I hated that because it felt foolish. So Cindy was sort of the amalgamation over the years. And I've made my peace with it. I don't think Cynthia fits me, but I can deal with Cindy. It's funny how our sense of who we are, our name has a lot to do with that. And if you give a child a very complex name that they don't understand, like I was never told anything about the goddess who was, it's another name for one of the goddesses, I can't remember which one, but I was never told about that part of it. Whereas if somebody has an Asian name that means beautiful flower or whatever, then you know, you understand what that means. It would be helpful if we had names that people understood what they mean. I guess that's too much to ask, but it would have made a difference to me. I've got an interesting list. I'm gonna write some of them. I went back over my class roles of names, African names, Asian names, South American names, English names from almost every culture. And so you get a sense of where they're from or their family history at least, which I think is interesting. I treasure that. I was a lucky teacher. Thank you. Enough.
Thank you. Okay, next is Richard.
Hi, I'd
Oh,
like to
Nora,
bring
I
up.
see.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up another point that was raised in this article under the, I think under the context of a term that you've heard me talk about in terms of what I have an issue with, which is this term microaggressions, and that is that of this person. I think she and others have brought up the issue about constantly being asked, "Where are you from?" And it just occurred to me that although I've lived in New Orleans most of my life, native New Orleanians will often ask, somehow they'll sense, well, you've been here most of your life, but where are you really from? And I'll say, well, I'm from Buffalo originally, but I consider myself a New Orleanian because that's where I've been most of my life. But when I travel abroad, I'm always asked, where am I from? And it got to the point I think it was in Ecuador. I had heard that so often that I started pointing up to the stars and just not saying anything. And one fellow just ended up laughing and saying, well, is that where you're from? Up there? So I think part of knowing, of kind of parsing out what is considered prejudicial or a racist attitude is to look again at some things that people may take offense at and say, well, it's natural to ask, where are you from? Now to do it repeatedly and say, well, you're not really from New York City. Look, the implication being, look at you, you're obviously from somewhere in Asia. There's a line that you cross where it does become offensive. And I agree with that. But to simply be asked, where are you from, because you don't look, quote, American is not, I would expect that most Asians would take it with a grain of salt and say, well, I live in New York, but my parents are from Korea, Japan, name the Asian country or the African country. But I think we need to tone down this issue about microaggressions being part and parcel of a racist attitude.
Thank you, Richard. Glenn is next. Lynn, sorry, has a clarifying question for Richard.
Richard, this is my clarifying question. Do you think it is appropriate for us as white people to tell minorities whether they're feeling aggressed or not? And I guess that's not a verb in English, it is in French. Whether they're feeling an insult to be constantly asked, where are you from? Is it our place to tell them what's offensive?
Well, as many of you know, all right, no, I'm not mute. I don't accept the premise of the question to begin with. Part of it is that, as many of you know, part of the problem is referring to white people as a group. There's no such thing as white people as a group. So I think the premise of the question is faulty to begin with. I have as much of a right to make an opinion about the issue about asking someone where they're from as someone else. And if someone asks me, where am I from? I can take it any way I want. And the person who is being asked, regardless of their background, can take it as they want. And as I said, there is a point at which it
Please.
becomes offensive if you're constantly asked, where are you really from? I agree that's going too far.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, Glenn, you're next.
Yeah, I've had the experience also, people asking me where I'm from because of the name. I remember, I was in the taxi cab business, and I'd be waiting at the airport. There might be 300 cabs out there waiting at the airport in an airport lot. And sometimes immigration would come in, searching for people who are here, who are not citizens. And so they see my name on my cab. One guy came over by me, say, "Where were you born?" And I know what he meant. But I just give him a flip answer. I said, "I was born at Charity Hospital." And he laughed. And then I told him, I said, "I got my name." Well, Ali Meg, I said, "I got my name same way Muhammad Ali got his name." Also, when a person changed their name, it's not a problem. It's not much of a problem it was back when I did it. When you go to get your birth certificate, you find that the birth certificate is in your old name. And that went on for years. If you needed a birth certificate to clarify who you are, you got two different names. But now if you have a name change now, if you ask for a birth certificate or social security card, it will be in your new name. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Glenn. I have Marion next, then Nora and Louise. Glenn, I'm going to mute you. I see you, Pedro. Marion?
Pedro has a clarifying question.
Oh, it was clarifying question?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead then.
Yeah, I would just, Glenn, can you spell the name? I got the Glenn and the Abdullah, but I didn't get the whole name that you go by.
Daoud as D-U-W-A-D.
All right, thank you.
No, pardon me. I don't hardly use it. I forgot how to spell it. It's D-A-W-U-D.
D-A-W-U-D?
Yeah, Daoud.
Daoud, okay.
That's the same as saying David.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That was a good clarifying question. Marion.
Okay, this brought back some memories of this discussion, brought back memories of the time I spent at the former A.D. Crossman Elementary School on South Carrollton Avenue here in New Orleans. It's called Esperanza now, because quite a few Hispanic students attended the school, or Spanish speakers, but there were also students that came from Cambodia, Vietnam, South Korea, and we had one family from China. But during the time I was there, I had students from Cambodia, Vietnam, and South Korea. Quite a few of the Cambodian families moved to California because there was a prominent citizen from their country who opened up a donut chain. And so that's why you hardly ever hear about any Cambodian people here in the city of New Orleans. But one particular student that I had to sort of step up to the plate and defend was a little boy from South Korea. And that I remember his name. He's a grown man now. His name was Sung Ho Chu. And every time you said the child's name, the other kids would laugh. So I had to finally address the class and tell them that this was disrespectful. The very next day, the little boy's mother met me downstairs at the front entrance to the school and gave me a bouquet of yellow flowers. I can see the flowers, but I can't think of the name of them. But anyway, there wasn't a problem because there was a concerted effort on the part of the faculty to make sure that the Asian students were not bullied or harassed in some way. But there was one little boy, one little white boy in my class who was very intelligent, very smart. But he made a very derogatory comment, and I had to speak to him privately. He said that the Chinese people threw spoons and forks into the air, and this is how they named their children. When they came down and hit the floor, that's what they named their children. So I had to tell him that that was disrespectful, and most certainly a form of harassment and bullying. And as I said, he was a very intelligent child, but he was 12 years old. So I took that into consideration. But I really appreciated the fact that I had the opportunity to teach children from Asian countries. I never had any particular biases or prejudices toward these people because I knew what it was like to be discriminated against, harassed, bullied, called names when integration finally kicked into gear. But I will always remember this child that going home and telling his mother that the teacher had defended him because this other little white kid just blurted out in class one day while Sung Ho was reading. I don't know how he can see. His eyes are slits.
Marion,
Yes.
your time is up.
Oh, it's up. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to get back on the list?
I'll think about it. I
Okay.
didn't know my story was going so long.
Okay. Nora, and then Louise, and then the list is open again.
Okay. So I think choosing a name for your child is a really important task. And I love hearing people's stories about how they got their names. I think names are sacred, and they can have just tremendous economic consequences. And when I was teaching school, I had students named Daiquiri and Bacardi. I also had students named Remington and Bullet and Rowdy. And I just thought, oh man, that, you know, sealing their fates of how difficult life could be for them. So that really made me sad. But and then another comment from the article, there was a quote about racism is not going to stop with everyone changing their names to Jason and Mary. What will make a difference is for Asians to have a seat at the table, be in positions of power, and be visible. And I also thought, well, that's sad that you have to be somebody in order to have your name be respected. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Next, I have Louise, and then the list is open again.
I kind of forgot what I was going to say. I think something to do with what Richard said about
Bill.
asking where you're from. I do that too, and I'd like to not think it's a microaggression. And normally, instead of just saying where are you from, I normally say where's your blood from, because I obviously know they're from wherever, you know, what city we were in. Because as someone with mixed blood and you know, interesting in culture and heritage, it's just an interesting thing for me. It's not like, you know, oh, you don't belong here. So I'd hate to think that it was always taken the wrong way. But Richard, you say that you get asked where you're from and it doesn't bother you. Well, it shouldn't, because you look white. So it's like asking you where you're from is obviously just asking what town you. Oh, excuse me.
That was Layla, sorry.
It's like one of those dog squeezy toys. So I don't know if that'd be the same thing, you know, for me as well as looking white. If someone came up and said, where are you from? Well, obviously my accent. Okay, so let's use another example. I just don't think that's an insulting thing. It's a bit different from asking someone who's obviously looks different to asking them where they're from. Do you not think? And the microaggressions, yes, they affect people. And as I said before, I'd like to think that me asking people where their blood is from would not be considered that. So that's something to think about, isn't it? Shoot, I had something else to say and I can't remember. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Next is Bill, and then the list is open.
That issue of where you're from is interesting. I often, not often, but at times I'm talking to someone who has a very interesting accent. They obviously didn't grow up in, I mean, that English is a second language. And I try to think, I'm genuinely curious about where they are from. And, but I hesitate to just blurt it out. And I try to pick a point in the conversation where I can ask it as a sort of normal thing. And then I immediately say, they're from South Africa. I said, oh, I've been there. I really love it. Or say something positive about the country of origin. So I think it's like many things, it's how you ask it, not what you say. It's how you ask it.
Sure.
And if you ask it in a more humble and friendly way, you can ask a lot and people will accept it. I am very pleased to see, I Googled African-American names for children and there's a whole long list now. And I see, unfortunately, I have to go to the hospital a lot for various reasons. And a lot of the nursing staff at Osner is African-American. And the young women tend to have names that sound African-American. And I'm very pleased with that trend, that people are taking names that are connected with their identity, cultural identity. So that's a great trend, I think. And I'll say one thing, final thing. I remember the comment was made during a Southern Christian Leadership Conference meeting. The guy said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And I agree with that completely.
Thank you, Bill. The list is open. Does anybody want to get on the list? Rebecca? Anybody else? Michelle? Okay, Rebecca, go ahead, and then Michelle, and anybody else can raise their finger if they want.
Well, it just occurred to me as it's wonderful to listen to everybody, that names, it generally speaking now, and if you consider yourself an American for a long time, you're probably named for somebody. But that's not the only way to choose a name. That's what's interesting about some of the Chinese names that I've heard. They're named after something that's beautiful and has a single word describing it. But it's interesting to think that there are different ways of choosing a name. You don't have to just choose a name because you're naming after somebody in your family history or in the country's history. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, sorry. Somebody in Austin.
Yeah, I was since we've got the time here and the list is open, I was gonna say, I threw in the chat an article I came across a couple of years ago for anybody who might be interested. So the link's there about pretty much what we're talking about here, names and how the connotations and everything about them. But this woman who is named, her mother named her Marijuana Pepsi. And she basically explains how she got that name and where it's taken her in this world. And it was really kind of an interesting perspective. And also talks about how in the education world, how the names affect outcomes for children. And so that was part of her. I think she got a PhD in education or a master's in education, one of the two. And that was one of her focuses, was how names affect education and the educational system. So it was kind of interesting. Anyway, just thought I'd share that.
Thanks. Louise? Are you going to unmute? Oh, is it clarifying? Go ahead and unmute.
Actually, no, it's a clarifying, and then I was going to say something. But,
Okay.
So the Marijuana Pepsi lady became a professor and wrote, but well, obviously didn't affect her badly then. That was really good.
Michelle, you're still muted. We can't hear you.
Yeah, as you'll read in the article, it was like that was what the point of why her mother named her that. She felt a kinship to her, and she thought it would take her places.
Interesting. So, and we did discuss mentioning, naming our son. We named him a Western name, first name, but his middle name is Hakim. Wanting to have some of my Arabic background, Hakim means the wise one, which hopefully he lives up to that. And the first name is just Dylan. It's just a nice name. So it wasn't from someone in our family and again, I'm not too, I don't put too much onus on a name unless, as Nora, you were saying some of your students were named those, I think, kind of ridiculous names. And so that might affect them in the future. Who knows? But yeah. It's kind of like tattoos, if you have tattoos all over your body, that doesn't matter. But if you've got them on your face, that's going to be, that's going to be a little bit of that's going to affect your life a little bit. So anywho, that's it.
Thank you. The list is open if we have like maybe one or two people. So Richard can go. And if there's one more person, or we'll just close after Richard. Nora, was that your finger? Okay, Richard and then Nora.
Just wanted to kind of expand a little bit on the clarifying question that was asked to me about how I, as a quote, white person, can presume that there's no microaggression in asking someone where they're from. And I think Bill helped me to maybe amplify this answer when he talked about it's the context and how you go about asking it, because I'll often be in a conversation with someone from Eastern Europe, a European American who's got a very thick accent, and as Bill said, in a context or at the appropriate time, I'll say, well, where are you from? And it's not because of how they look, it's because they clearly have an accent that indicates that at one point, at least, they were from somewhere other than the US. So, I mean, this gets to kind of me chafing again at the concept of me as a quote, white person acting in a microaggressive way against somebody who sounds or looks different because of the way I look. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that we've got to, let's tone down the issue about microaggression and racism here. Everything is in context. And I think the example I gave should indicate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. And then Nora, and then we'll start the wrap up.
Richard was done. Okay.
Yeah, he muted himself.
I just find it interesting that I don't think anybody has mentioned the indigenous names in our country. I'm thinking of Wilma Mankiller, the Cherokee activist, and just find it interesting that nobody has mentioned, I don't think. That's all.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite names. I wish I could change my name to that. Just kidding. Okay, so we'll start the wrap up. And interestingly, we have Marva and Greer. So Marva, go ahead, I'm sorry, who did not speak and have 2 minutes to do their wrap up. So Marva, go ahead. If you want to tell us why you chose Greer's name, that would be good. That would be fun. Up to you.
My mom always took names from the Bible, and Joseph was one of them. Anthony was one of them. So I thought I would name my children odd names. And I made a name, Greer. I don't want her to feel, I don't want people to think that she's named after Greer Garson. But her name is spelled Grear, Greer. I named my son after his dad, which is Daryl. But my last name, Guillemette, they pronounce it in French as Guillemette. And often when I was using a credit card in the downtown stores, Gachos, Kriegers, Maison Blanche, they would often ask me for my ID. And I was dressed in a nursing uniform, and street clothes, I was well dressed. And I even had clerks to ask me, are you French? And I said, no, I'm African American. And she said, this is a strange name for an African American. And I didn't owe them any explanation. And told them, I replied, this is my married name. My maiden name is Washington. And so I got tired of that, and I didn't answer anymore. So I felt that was a strange question. And always they looked at me before they asked me, and I had naturally kinky hair, and I was a woman of color. And so I took that as a racist act. Thank you. I've enjoyed listening at everybody's input in great article, Phyllis.
Thanks, Marva. Greer. Are you there, Greer?
Okay, it finally worked. It was
Okay.
delayed or something. Okay. Yeah, I've had issues with my first and my last name. People find it difficult to pronounce. And I appreciate the attempt. And I'll correct them. I work in healthcare. A lot of times I have to deal with people who have different names. And they appreciate the attempt. And I asked them, how did I do? And they're like, are you close, but you're not close there. I say, well, can you please tell me how to pronounce it? And they'll tell me. So the next time I see them, because I make it an issue to remember, because people, I mean, It's a French name. We basically lived in a French and Spanish colony at one point in history in this town. And you mean to tell me you can't get my name right? I mean, come on now. All right. And I was listening to everybody because there was stuff I wanted to say, but then somebody would say something else and I was thinking about it. Then someone would say something else and I would think about it. And I'm going to say this, it's really not about the name. It's not about the name. It's about who you are and if you're considered foreign in America. That's what this is about. Because every Black person, just about who was born in this country and people were either indigenous or transported here, basically has one part of their name that is what's considered quote unquote American white. One name or the other. And having those names has not stopped racism, has not done anything. So whether you call yourself your full name of your ethnicity or not, it's not even about that. It's about so much more. This is just one thing, aspect of how we're treated based on what's considered a difference. So, I mean, changing name one way or another really is not going to change the situation. People are just going to do what they do. We change laws, hearts and minds do not change. If you're going to be a racist, you're going to be a racist. If you're not a racist, then that's a good thing. And I remember I had a teacher ask me where I'm from. I'm like, I'm born and raised in New Orleans. They're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, that's where I'm from. Like, well, I'm looking at the last name. I say, yeah, and we have history here where people have last names that I guess you figured don't go with the way I look. But that's neither here nor there. But my last thing is, I've noticed I've been a nurse for 24 years. And I've noticed that like nurses that who are not of color or not ethnic, if they see a name that is something unusual to them, it's like they always have to make a comment. And I'm like, you know what? Let me go call this person because I mean, if it's all that, you don't need to be doing it. That's my way of stepping in and curtailing somebody's possible being uncomfortable. But in doing so, I remember it was a name of an African general. It was a Muslim name. So, and I explained to the person who was about to call this person, I say, do you realize the power behind that name that this person has? Do you know who this was? And I broke it down from, so I'm like, they were like, well, I didn't know that. I say, well, think about that. You looked at this name and you saw, oh, this is crazy. I say, I look at this name because of who I am. I know what it meant and who that person was. And I told him, I said, you need to rethink about your attitude. And I just walked off. I enjoyed the pick, Phyllis. It was really good. I mean, it was really insightful for me because anytime I really don't have much to say, you got me. Thank you.
I am shocked that you never raised your hand. Now, Pedro has a clarifying question, which we don't normally do in the wrap up, but since it was Greer's first time talking, I'm going to allow it. So go ahead, Pedro.
Yeah, my question was just, I didn't speak today. I had a question. Does that mean a minute and wrap up or?
Okay, no, you get 2 minutes and wrap up. So you don't have a clarifying question for?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my memory was that I saw you talking. Okay, go ahead and do your wrap up then. No more clarifying questions, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, so a couple of things. When someone asks where are you from, it may be kind of a white privilege thing, but it seems like the question should be, or the answer should be the same place you're from. We are all part of the human race. When I've studied human biology and health extensively in my work, and really our biochemistry is being the same species, namely the human species, is essentially identical. it's over 99% the same, everyone's individual biochemistry. And the subtle differences can create, whether it's skin color change or differences, or I'm allergic to peanut butter and you're not, that type of thing. So I just wanted to mention that. And it also occurs to me, I think if we start from that, I like what Bill brought to the table, if I can find it. If you do not have a seat at the table, you are on the menu. I think really reflecting on that gives you an idea of the nature of oppression, that you have an incredible, wealth inequality that I've spoken about endlessly. And that these people that sit at the table, even Malcolm said that, just because I sit at the table doesn't make me a diner. I'm only a diner until you let me dine, or unless you let me dine, unless you give me the rights and the access and the outcomes that everyone else has. So I just was struck by the name, by the article, because of just the form of discrimination that people feel by citing their name and citing, where they come from. So anyhow, thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Pedro. So this is the part where I will give some wrap-up comments. There was a lot of good statements and observations made during this discussion, which I really appreciated, and how
We didn't,
engaged.
aren't you supposed to get
Oh,
back?
yes. Oh my gosh. I don't know what's happening in my brain today. Okay. Glenn, you want to
We
go
all
first?
feel you, Phyllis.
Thank you. Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I also want to mention that I have a daughter by the name of Anissa.
That's pretty.
What else I want to say? Oh, shoot.
Do you want
See,
to?
you messed me up.
I'll have somebody else go and we'll come back to you if you want. Okay. Okay. Marva went. Richard.
Oh, this was a good discussion. Enjoyed catching up with folks. And I guess if you were asking Phyllis about our own names, it just occurred to me for the first time in my life that I don't know where my middle name came from, which is Richard. But I do know that my first name was simply my parents had a very good friend at the time that they liked a lot, so they named me after him. But as far as Richard goes, for the first time now, after all these years, it just occurred to me, I don't know why I was named Richard, but it was a good discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Yes, thank you. I have an idea for a conversation, and I don't know who to send it to, but it's to discuss at least part of one of the poems by Amanda Gorman, who gave the I don't know, that's upside down, you can't see. So who spoke at Biden's inauguration. She read a poem. So if you let me know.
Are you talking about the inaugural poem? Or are you talking about her New Year poem?
Another poem. I have a book of her poems, and this one I think that would be interesting to discuss at this meeting. But I don't know how to send that.
You can reply to the email where you get the link and the topic and
okay.
Put it in there.
I will.
Because that will only go to Erace. It won't go to everybody. Just
okay. Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it, because I think I've used my minute. I love the discussion though about the names. That was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Great article, great discussion, very thought-provoking. I have a name, I go by my middle name, which is an endless source of confusion. And I always tell people, don't ever call your child by the middle name. My name is Bill, but my first name is Sumner, after my father. And in things like the DMV or Ochsner Health, I'm required to go by Sumner because that's what's on my driver's license. And my name, Sumner, is always, not always, but frequently mispronounced as Summer. rather than Sumner. And I have to correct it, but I try to do it with a sense of humor. So, but my advice to people is don't call your child by their middle name because it's so confusing with IDs and everything. Anyway, thanks. Great article. Appreciate it, Phyllis. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy.
Interesting discussion. I wanted to add one piece. When I first meet a child or a new adult, I often will ask, tell me how to pronounce your name. Tell me what to call you. Because sometimes from the person, it has a different nuance and it makes my memory work better. Also, I think it's personal. I think our names often define us. And I think that's really valuable that we pay attention to it. I'm hopeful. I think it'd be interesting to do a discussion about each of us, what our name means and where they came from, because I think we will learn about this group. It's a valuable group of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Lynn?
I agree. I did enjoy hearing the personal stories and getting to know my fellow club members a little bit better. Thank you very much for the topic and for the comments that people have shared. Good to be back together again, and Happy New Year to all.
Thank you. Nora?
Enjoyed the conversation. No more comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. Michelle?
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation too. And I will add too that names can be pretty contentious. I mean, it's funny how many people you find out go by their middle names, for example, for whatever reason, they don't use their first names. Louise and I had a little side conversation over chat on that one about my middle name, which is after my grandmother, which she's still alive, so I can't really go by that one since I'm not real crazy about Michelle. And I will also add that within my own family, my first name, Michelle, is somewhat contentious, at least on my father's side. My first cousin is named Michelle. So my father's dad named his first daughter, Michelle as well. And his last name was Manning, of course. So there were two Michelle Mannings in my family. And to this day, there are still two Michelle Mannings. And that caused, and I was the first one too, by the way. And my dad was the middle brother. So this was his older brother naming his first child. So there's history around that and contention and, that came about just because of a name. So it's just funny. But anyway, interesting conversation. Hope everybody has a good week.
Thanks, Michelle. Marion?
Thank you for this discussion. It brought back many memories. My two older children have the first names, for their first names, the middle names of my two younger siblings. Elena Therese is my older daughter, and Kenneth Ellsworth is my older son. Ellsworth is his father's middle name, and Kenneth is my brother's middle name. So again, my two older children are named Elena Therese and Kenneth Ellsworth. Thank you for this topic. Very interesting.
Thank you. Louise?
Yeah, just to reiterate what people have said, it's been nice getting to know a little bit more about people's names and lives. And Michelle, I'm going to call you Ray. And your grandma is not around, so it doesn't matter whether she's alive.
She is still alive. She's still alive.
No, I know, but she's not around when we're having coffee.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to call you Ray. I love that name. And Glenn, my niece, one of my nieces, I've got 25 of them, is called Anissa as well. It is a very pretty name. Oh, and my name, Louise, means warrior woman. So I'm kind of happy with that. I'll stick with that. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Glenn?
yes, all those names that I give my children I mentioned, they come out of a book of the attributes of God. So each one of them have a name to live up to. It's attribute of God. And like you, Phyllis, when I meet a lot of ethnic people from different ethnic groups, and when they give me their name, I get them to say it until I can get the sound of it. And I would write down it in English how it sound to me. And that's how when I do meet them again, I can remember how to say it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, now I will go into my final remarks. I was taking a lot of notes while you were talking, things that were coming up for me. And I was remembering when I was in seminary in California, where there are a lot of Asian people. There was a young Chinese woman in a class, and she said her name to the professor, who was having everybody go around and say their names. And he was white. And his response to her name was, "Oh, why couldn't it be something simple like Betty?" And
Ugh, that's disgusting.
oh, sorry, I got to mute you, Cindy. I was shocked in that environment that such a thing was said, and just shocked. And then later, when I was working in Berkeley, I worked with an HR manager. She was Chinese American. Her parents named her Shirley after Shirley Temple, and then she married a white guy. So her whole name was like Shirley McSomething. So she was so like outgoing, and she would just laugh. And she said, when I show up for job interviews, people don't know what to do because her name does not match her face. But she had a really good sense of humor about it. I think what Cindy talked about was like having all the kids and sharing the food that your different ethnic groups at your school have is a great idea, because in the article they talk about, people making fun of people's stinky food because it just smells different than what they're used to. And I think that's a great way to get the kids to really appreciate each other's cultures, and you can learn a lot about culture from the food of the culture. When I was in high school, we had, my best friend was Greek. Her mom and dad moved here from Greece. And then we had some Korean students and other ethnic groups. But when my senior year, our tradition was we all just called each other by our mother's first names. I don't know why we did that. But the Korean family, their mother's name was Puksu. So every one of those kids got called Puksu. And my Greek friend, her mother's name was Kula, I think. And so that's what she went by, but I just had to be Alice. So that was kind of boring. But I think that was another way to we weren't making fun of the specific ethnic names because everybody was doing this. What has happened to Bill? He's glowing.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just the light reflection.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I see that.
That's okay.
I get certain angles.
Yeah. And so here, it's interesting, since I've been in New Orleans, first of all, I don't know who these people are that Marva and Greer are running into, who've never met an African-American person with a French sounding name. That's really common here. That doesn't seem strange. I don't even know what they're, unless it was just to be obnoxious and racist. I remember the first time I met somebody and called him Mr. Richard instead of Mr. Richard. Got corrected. Never made that mistake again. And like Glenn, I also changed my last name as an adult for different reasons than Glenn's. But here in New Orleans is the only place my last name is Tenney, Tenney. This is the only place anybody has ever tried to pronounce it Tenney. And then I'm like, oh, it's actually Tenney, it rhymes with penny. And I'm like, but Tenney makes me feel fancy, so don't worry. It's kind of cute. And I also have had people, because I don't sound like most people who are from this city, ask me, where are you from? But I don't get insulted because I'm white. And it means a different thing. If I say Ohio, they're not going to say, but where are you from? They're not going to ask that follow-up question. They never do. And I do believe that the microaggressions that people of color encounter are real, and that people who look like me don't experience those same questions the same way, and we have to be understanding of what they're experiencing. I would like to know who named the nurse in the hospital that I talked to, who told her she should go by Jonah. I'd like to find that person and have a talking to them. I was talking at work with one of our fellows who is Indian American, and we were both discovering that she's from Northern California and I had lived there. And then she said, where did you grow up, or where are you from? Because I said I had moved there at some point. And I said, Ohio. And she said, oh, that's why you're so nice. And I'm like, is that a thing that people think? I don't know. And then I also had somebody say, oh, I thought, like, I had told them I was from Ohio, and they said, oh, I thought you were a Yankee, no offense. And I just laughed. I'm like, oh, no offense taken. And there really was no offense taken. It's rarely heard here, in my opinion. And I want to wrap up by saying this idea of, like, when people have chosen, like Glenn, to change their name to, I mean, parents, I'd say sometimes get a pass, but on respecting it or not. But this is also something faced by the trans community, that they choose new names for themselves. And I think that could be another whole topic of, the concept of, like, dead naming somebody, or referring to them by the pronouns that they were given at birth. I think that is another form of respect that we can show to people. In terms of this article, I found it really, like I said in the beginning, moving. I learned some more about how to pronounce things that are Chinese. I think there's a link in there with the pronunciation guide, if I remember right. And, I think we have to just try to, like, learn to respect people from their own culture, and because there's beauty, like I said in the beginning, that we don't know what we don't know. I loved about her mom's name being Willow and her dad's name being Forest, and how those two things melded together. And that's what the art on this article shows. It shows a willow tree with a forest in the background and her name on it, and I just thought that was really good art as well. So that, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all for everything, and then we'll do announcements.